We do have a quorum, and so we're on to public comment. Ray, is there any public comment?
No, we haven't received any requests.
All right, good. Okay, we're now on to the consent agenda, which includes the minutes from our April 2nd meeting, financial reports, and the MCRPC staff reports. Are there any items that need to come off the consent agenda for further discussion? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Rob.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. We're now on to the regular items, which are essentially consent agenda, and we do not have any of those. So we're now on to items for information and discussion. And leading it off is the commission group discussion on the housing coordinator, which DCEO has graciously provided us with a grant. Ray, I assume you'll give us a lowdown on the whole concept.
Yes, as you all been aware, since I did email the announcement, we recently received announcement on the award by DCEO, Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, and that's called Economic Development arm of the state government. And we are one of 25 grantees under this grant program, which make up of two sub-programs, if you will. One's more related to Main Street revitalization, and the other is the implementation of the action plan under a previous program. And as you recall, you adopted the Housing Recovery Action Plan March of last year. And so the grant that we have been awarded is for implementation of that plan. So we're grateful for the state to allow us the opportunity to work on this. And by saying us, I meant really the whole region. It's not just the MCRPC. As you all know, housing is an issue that affects everybody, whether it is what we call the affordable housing sector or the market rate housing sector. So the grant agreement is being drafted by staff of DCEO. We've been having communications with them, hoping to get it in maybe June, maybe a couple months or something. And then in the meantime, as you know, the grant would fund like a housing, what we call housing coordinator position. It is a term position. It will go until April of 2027. And so it is something that we really looking forward to. It's one of the recommendations in the grant that you adopted is to hire this person. And also the grant is going to be supplemented by financial contributions by the city and the town, so that we can, as local match, for the to meet the requirements of the grant application. If you recall, number of staff did work really hard, especially Mark Adams, who just happened on the screen too, former staff of MCRPC, and so we glad that work out, and we was one of the grantees. And so while DCEO is working on the grant agreement, we are working on drafting a job description for the posting of the position. And so Luke, one of our staff members, and I come working on that together now, and then we'll run it through the city and the town, and then we'll advertise the position, because as you all know, it would take time for any recruitment process, and that person, and depending who that person will be, he or she, depending if that person will be available right away or have a few weeks of notice for his or her employer, that kind of situation. But we are hoping all this will be settled by July. I mean, that's my hope. Fingers crossed.
Settled in terms of
the grant agreement will be executed and then the recruitment process will be done. And so we have a person in place. And also, in the meantime, we're going to to form an implementation committee because the housing coordinator will be working with this committee. And from recent discussion with the county administrator, the city managers of the city and the town, the committee will be not a huge size, probably 7 or 8 people, just for efficiency purposes. But then as you all know, housing is such a broad topic, and though there are a number of subject matter experts, from different sectors, and so those individuals, organizations will be invited from time to time for the discussion as the certain topic arise, as determined and requested by the implementation committee. And the implementation committee is really, the goal is to implement the plan that you have talked. And if you recall, there are a number of recommendations included in that plan. Having said that, we also recognize it's not just an MCRPC, it's not just a housing coordinator with that committee to make things happen. The city and the town have the zoning powers, the county, right? The funding sources. We cannot dictate, okay, this is where the housing department is going to, the realtor community, they know what works. I mean, it really requires a lot of players and layers of funding and factors to see a development takes place. Even sometimes after decision of a housing development is approved, supply chain issues, interest rates, interest by the private sector, developers. This is the only place in the whole country, that look for housing development. There are many cities out there looking for the same thing. So everything takes time, but really the primary responsibility of that person is to staff and to work with that committee to implement the plan. And then we'll be with the assistance and contributions, input from the different experts on certain topics. And so it's exciting because without that grant, somehow we have to come up with some funding source, some funding to hire somebody. And to be honest, I don't know. It has to be attractive enough, right? We may be able to raise some money, but I don't know to the full amount that both the state and the city and town combined now would be available. So we're looking forward to that opportunity. And, also working with that committee, we'll be providing suggestions from the city, town, county for representatives, and also maybe certain nonprofits be invited to form the committee. And we know 2 years or a little bit less, through April, because the grant. It's not a long time, to be honest. I mean, you've seen, and people
No.
Yeah.
That's what the red flag for me.
Yeah.
What happens to the funding for this position after April of 2027?
Mm-hmm.
But, because look at it from both sides. You said this takes time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, whatever, these things are not, it takes time. And then from the person who's engaging and taking this position, they know up front that the position is not funded.
Mm-hmm.
Why would they make that commitment?
Right.
So I wouldn't take the job.
Yeah.
But that's a challenge. So what happens after April 2027? Are other organizations funding going to be sought to keep the position in place?
John, did you have something?
Two questions. I'll do you both at once. You can answer them like you would.
Sure.
But first of all, I'm wondering what the organizational structure would be. Like, who would this housing coordinator be reporting to? Which entity? Because there has to be one. They have to have an employer
But
and someone to evaluate them and so on. And the second question would be, are we foreseeing somebody who's a frontline worker doing intake, or somebody who's basically doing administrative coordination of the whole issue of housing in the community?
mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll answer your question first. What's going to happen after April 2027? I believe we cannot banking on just the grant funding. It has to be a continuous process that look for funding opportunities, and we have to keep looking for partners. We know housing is not just something to be solved by the government, and so employers, your universities, higher ed, they're the ones also feeling the pain, for the employees and to recruit workers. So definitely we'll be having conversations with them once workers start going. And of course, the county, the government, hopefully will contribute because it's really a public service type issue. And so I believe this has to be an ongoing effort. It's not, okay, we satisfied with the money. It's better than nothing, to be honest, but it buys time in a way.
Yeah, we have to be seeking that funding source.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the funding source just doesn't happen overnight.
Exactly. Yeah. And to answer Mr. Burrell's question, the structure on paper, we're the grantee. MCLPC is the grantee. So we are the ones who have to report back to the state, providing reports, progressive reports and whatnot. So on paper, we have to be accountable to the state. In reality, that person more answering to, at least the way it's envisioned now, it's not set in the stone, but that person will be answering to that committee. And which make up representatives from the local governments, and also maybe a few local representatives from some of the nonprofits related to housing. But there has to be some collaboration with the staff, the MCLPC staff, and of course, commissioning some feedback or whatever. We all work together because we're trying to solve the same thing. But for the day-to-day, and in terms of responsibilities and accountabilities, would be to that implementation committee. And so there might be some sort of bylaws or something to kind of needs to be drafted to put it in more detail. But I see that person working with not just local governments, because on the policy side, it's not just on what we call the work with the clients, if you will. That case management type is it's more policy, working with the city and town, funding, maybe with the economic development staff or the city and town and county. We're working with the developers, providing research, and really working as part of the team to make housing happen. And it can be market rate again, and it's the full spectrum and affordable housing on homelessness fund. And so really trying to address all the different aspects, but won't necessarily have the magic solution, but because it always has to be team effort, because housing really takes all different sectors. And so we'll be working more closely, with the implementation committee. Of course, staff like Luke more on housing. I'm also part of that group will probably collaborate a lot with that person.
Okay, that's what I was curious about. That answers that. It's kind of a higher level position
Yes,
than the housing coordinator position that existed in the last 2 years that was under Mid-Central.
correct.
Was managed by Mid-Central with funding
Correct.
from somewhere else.
Correct. Yeah, the current, just for the purpose, in case some commission members not aware, that's what is called the housing navigator position. Now, there's some other cities and counties out there also use that name too, because depending on the localities, it might mean different things. But here in our region, there's a housing navigator position that has been funded partially by the city and partially by the town. That person is housed under that funding, but housed in person under the MCCA and county central community action. And so it's a little bit, and that person's primary responsibility is more on case management, looking for houses, talking with people who need housing, especially more on the affordable housing side, and people don't have the income level, and then that person will work with landlords, working with hotels sometimes to give hotel vouchers. So more on that level. But this position, the housing coordinator, is more on a high level policy implementation.
It'll be all housing, not particularly low income housing.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
And Ray, I'm assuming that with the job description that there will be a metrics developed to indicate whether or not this position has accomplished what we desire it to be. So when we get to the point of 2027, we've got a rationale and a reason for why this needs to get accepted or extended. Or if we find out that it's not ineffective, that we look at a different direction.
Yes, there in the job description there'll be qualifications. You work out criteria we use, but to form a metrics type, we plan to have some, because I think it's relying heavily on that adopted housing plan, which I think has a really good layout of the different tasks, almost, the different categories of things that person needs to address or in working with our partners. So that will be a good metrics, in terms of, okay, how many developers has been contacted, working with about housing programs, how many different sites, what research topics and what, and looking at other communities of something of similar characteristics of our region, that kind of thing. That will, in order to measure the accomplishment, if you will, but in terms of extension, if there's still money available, although there's a deadline of April 2027, there's a possibility if there's still money left over, because then we can apply for extension at this stage and buy us a little bit more time. But the funding, we have to keep looking for funding opportunities.
Yeah, and my concern centers around the whole issue that we create these positions, but I don't think we always create metrics to determine whether or not the position has really been successful or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so having kind of a plan of what this person is tasked to do, and then periodically following through to who will do that. Well, that's next. That would be next on my question, is that it would seem to me to fall to MCRP.
Yeah, I think it would make sense for MCRPC to draft something and then run it by the implementation committee, and then definitely input from you all and the advisor definitely will be welcome. But that would make sense, because eventually is to measure how successful, and if we should continue, maybe that we will learn, during that 2-year period, that hey, there's certain aspects need to be adjusted, because sometimes you never know until you try. And is this really the first one position that can coordinate so many represented organizations, if you will. We all know there's so many organizations and groups out there working on housing, right? I mean, the Housing Coalition, there's like 30, 40 members representing different groups. There's no one organization to coordinate all these efforts, and for different reasons. And some are really valid because they have different funding, missions, and restricted by certain parameters and whatever. And but here's the opportunity to coordinate all these efforts, such as the presentation you heard not long ago on the continuum of care, the homelessness issue. And so many counties, not just McLean County, are involved in that and how to coordinate. And that's just for homelessness, let alone housing issue from market rate to affordable. There are too many issues. There are lots, but I think the good news is there are lots of good individuals and groups out there. They really want to have this housing issue addressed. So that's a very good start. Funding, yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No.
When you say coordinate, does this person have the authority to require these other organizations to be aligned with the housing plan that we adopted? Or are they simply trying to get those organizations to collaborate in alignment with that plan?
That person, I don't think has the authority to.
Yeah.
And that's why the implementation committee, by comprising of, well, usually the government has the power, right? The authority and the power.
Yeah.
In enforcing zoning, that's why they say, okay, it has to meet the zoning requirements in order to put a certain type of development.
They're going to have to build a consensus.
Yeah,
I think maybe that's the key
there. Yes, exactly.
Well, so I'm looking back at my notes. So we talked about the possible model for the implementation committee at last May's meeting. Mm-hmm. So what has been the traction around developing that model, identifying who should be part of that committee, and forming that committee? Because and correct me if I'm reading the action plan wrong, but it looks like hiring the housing coordinator is not an input into that committee forming and starting to meet.
Mm-hmm. Right. In the plan implementation committee is one of the recommendations, and then hiring or having a housing coordinator is another one of the recommendations, right? They're separate.
Yeah.
But they are related. And so after the plan adoption, in fact, Mr. Adams and I, we were looking at two models, and then we shared with the executive committee members, and then recently we had a conversation with the city managers and the county administrator, and also learning from the different groups and structure, what would be more effective, right? We've come to the conclusion that a large group may not be as effective time-wise in getting things moved along. It might make more sense to have more smaller core group, but then have all different I would say task force or committees, but then they have subject matter experts, right? On maybe from the realtors, from the major employers, from homelessness sector, from the Economic Development Council, and looking at things from a different perspective, and to be invited when the committee decides, okay, this week we would like to look at homelessness. Okay, well, they will invite folks from that. So that's kind of the modified version of the two models that some of you have seen. And And so that will be the model that will be taking shape and use. So we have seen there's some other kind of structure models in the county and whatnot, and it seems like from the administrators, they thought was will be more effective to especially the timing, not the timing, it's just time.
Well, we only have this person for a short period of time, so what are you gotta tell them exactly what we want them to do, and then we want them to be successful.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm looking at the plan here on my phone. I think this was before I jumped on board here, but there's an implementation matrix as part of the plan, and it's very detailed. It outlines the task, who's going to do it, the timeline, when it should be done, who's going to fund it. So I think and then the plan itself has some pretty detailed steps of what is the work that is to be done. I think prioritizing that work certainly is important, but that might be the first task of that group, right? But I could see pretty easily the person that's in there can report on the productivity of these things by following this example. It's in there. So,
Mark, you had a question?
I maybe missed this. When is this committee going to be formed? Is there a date?
We're hoping by July, when all the
July 1, July 31?
probably for now I would say by July 31st, because a lot of things have to take place. The grant agreement with the state, and then the recruitment process, which will take time, to find somebody who's willing to take a term position. We've seen,
No, I would say the committee, not.
Yeah, the implementation committee.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. By the end of April, and that's trying to be pessimistic.
End of April?
Oh, not April, but July.
End of July.
Yeah, but we start. So we're giving about 3 months time on the usual. Yeah.
And so the city will have representatives, the town will have, you'll probably be a rep. You mentioned maybe some others. And so have these other organizations that we might want to have reps already on board to try to get somebody?
Not yet, because we just having conversation with the state, and so now we know roughly when the funding will be in place, all the paperwork. A lot of times that's number one, and so we'll be having conversations with those representatives.
But I mean, the committee can be formed anytime.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? I mean, you don't need, they don't necessarily, it's helpful to have funding, right? But they can be informed even before the grant's officially been doling out dollars.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's why we're hoping this concurrently, because otherwise we have a committee but no staff. And so all this have to happen, is how we see it. I mean, the committee can be formed even before the DCO sends us the paperwork to sign. We definitely hope that will be the case. Just on the whole picture, for the broad picture, all this, had to line up.
Well, I think like Amy points out, the matrix, I think one of the biggest things that needs to be connected is, I don't think there'll be any pushback from EDC or the city that they need to be involved, but who is going to be responsible for implementing which items that were recommended in the action plan. I think that's where you're going to have some discussion and things to start hashing out now.
I can hash out now.
Totally agree.
Our start.
I think we have a great opportunity here. We just want to make sure we leverage it as much as possible to get the most out of it in this short time frame, so that we can be positioned after, we'd have 1 year of the person being in the position before we probably have to even look at looking for new funding sources for after that. So
yeah.
Carl, did you have something?
Yeah, just real quick. I'm excited for the prospects for this. I guess at some point, even if it was in a casual manner, I'd be very curious to see what the organizational chart looks like.
Mm-hmm.
and what the committee structure would look like and the job description. I'd just like to just peek at that. I would suggest, just for having worked with DCEO before, I think the committee, since you're the fundee or the grant, you're the holder of the grant, I would suggest the committee structure be a little skewed towards the planning commission, since it's your name on the grant, and you really are the experts in the community. So I would kind of suggest that, but I would defer. I certainly wouldn't be a backseat driver, but I would be curious to see some of those, even if it was just done casually. Nothing formal, no big project or anything like that. Okay, thanks. Only because there's a lot to get done in the next 2 months.
Yeah, agree, definitely.
So,
Yeah,
thanks.
Good.
Questions for Ray?
Yeah, we're hoping, we've seen, even from my former jobs there, like people, those term positions, even temporary but professional type positions, I've seen those feel not easy, to be honest. There might be full-time mom, they took maternity leaves and got kids grown up, 3 years, they want to back to the workforce. I've seen people like that, or people relocated, they don't mind, and then maybe the market is so bad, they don't mind even have a term position. Like right now, as you know, there are layoffs and resignations with federal government. There might be people with heart, looking for opportunities like that. So we'll see. I mean, perhaps if somebody, because the time is so tight, somebody familiar with our area, at least we not know everything, but then because somewhat of the housing aspects and some connections that definitely will help to move things along, to be able to work with the city, town, county folks and other stakeholders in the area definitely will help if there's an existing relationship already established. So we actually we really have a draft job description. We're trying to put some final touches on, and then we'll share with the local governments, and then we'll put it
Share with the commission.
Sure. What impact and
Carl, I think it'd be good to see some stability on that group too, because they're all involved in boards and commissions and committees and come and go and everything like that. So I think going on to this thing, we need to maybe have an expectation that the person commit themselves to 2 years. That makes sense. Otherwise, you're playing musical chairs. And I like being a townie. I like the local knowledge, somebody that's already familiar with landscape.
The other thing too. Yeah, the other thing too, Ray, that I would recommend is that we keep this on our agenda for getting monthly reports or updates in terms of what this person is doing, maybe inviting this person here to the commission to report out to us to kind of keep us in the loop and know what's happening with it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it has to be a really close relationship because number one, our name's on the grant. Number two, you look at different issues from different perspectives, and that's an asset, to be honest. I mean, you represent different organizations, private sector, public sector, and whatnot. And it's not one person's solution. It's not one committee. Look at our housing and urban development, the U.S. Department of Housing Development and Urban Development. They celebrate the CDBG Community Development Program 50th anniversary last year, I believe. The housing issue still exists, despite all this federal funding, all different programs. And you all know, read news about housing issues in other cities. You travel, you know all this. So how do we? It's a challenge for us. How do we solve this? Give all these competitions for the same amount of money, maybe not the same amount. Hopefully, there's some people willing to donate. But housing developers, they need the big money, right? And so there are a lot of factors. We know it's not easy. If it's that easy, we won't be looking at the implementation of the plan. And so we know it's going to be challenging. It's up to rise up, to overcome those challenges. If we cannot do it, staff cannot do it by ourselves. We need your help.
Other questions for Ray about this stuff? If not, can we move on to the Regional Housing Initiatives update? Luke?
Good afternoon, everyone. I have the Regional Housing Initiative updates for the month of May. Under local updates, MCRPC facilitated the April Housing Staff Meeting on April 24th, and we'll be hosting the May Housing Staff Committee meeting on May 22nd. We've also submitted the fourth quarter report to the town, and we will be submitting the fourth quarter report to the city sometime maybe this week or next week. Then we're also working on the 2024-2025 annual report. For the consolidated plan, public comment period for the town's consolidated plan ended April 21st. They didn't receive any public comment, and their council approved the plan on the same night. Both the city and the town's waiting allocation numbers from HUD before they can proceed. Moving on to other updates, MCRPC attended the Unhoused Task Force meeting on April 22nd. So that was hosted by the Center of Human Services. A lot of housing agencies and local government attended that. We were divided into breakout rooms to discuss the multiple barriers related to homelessness. And then last week, we attended a public forum hosted by Home Sweet Home Ministries regarding the shelter village. So they're calling the project the bridge, and that's located at the corner of Main Street and Open. So I'm not sure if you guys were there or not, but the project received a lot of public support from the public. However, some of the negative comments include like concerns about the location and whether Home Sweet Home can manage the project properly. Other than that, most of the comments were positive. So those are the updates that I have.
Has Home Sweet Home figured out how they're going to fund the maintenance of the bridge right now?
That's a good question, because right now, I believe Matt has been looking for like funding. I'm not really sure if they've actually pulled in the 1 million for the annual maintenance for it. I'm not really sure if they've actually gathered the funding or not.
Yeah, so they're still seeking funding for its maintenance. Mm-hmm. But they do have money to get the process built.
Because they said if they get the approval, they can start construction as soon as like early June, and then have it open around November.
But the bridge project, according to a recent article in WDLT's source, it's going to have to be gone by the end of June because of a major sewage maintenance project that's happening right along Sugar Creek there.
But this is a different, the bridge that we're talking about is the one down here, not the one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the bridge on Main Street, Sugar Creek.
Yeah,
and that encampment is going to have to be gone by the end of June, according to what I just read.
Yeah, they're going to have to be gone. But the process that's over here behind the old Y,
I'd forgotten they called it that.
Yeah, is still underway.
Do you have other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Jennifer, the Human Services Transportation Plan, bus service.
Yes. So this applies for us to 5 counties across Central Illinois. We've talked about this a lot. So we will, the next meeting of those 2 committees, which we have meet jointly, will be on June 16th in Pontiac. The June agenda, I don't think that came out right, includes procedural and policy issues that we want to get, especially the policy committee, engaged with, and discussion of the joint committees for both, but action if they think it's appropriate by the policy committee. Good news, we have received a contract from IDOT for next year's program, so we will be continuing our HSTP coordination efforts through fiscal 26, which takes it for another year. And all the documents that have to go back, forms and stuff have been done and submitted back, so we should be in good shape there. One of the things we're doing with the remainder of this year, and Anthony is working on this quite a bit, and others, is intensifying what the state calls mobility management. And they have a very specific protocol for this. And the idea is to engage and advise the public about what their options are for a certain type of plan or a certain type of trip. We haven't done this much because we have a small region and people were pretty tied to the service suppliers, mostly show bus for the rural areas. But we just acquired a shiny new cell phone, which we'll be using in this effort, in part because on the website, we're going to have the phone number, we're going to have contact people. It's all going to be much more sort of in your face than it's been up to now, in the hopes that we can serve some function in terms of giving people access to resources they may not have known they had. And finally, our staff is participating in discussions with Connect Transit, which, as you know, will be, as of July 1, offering the rural service as well as the urban. And we are looking at, ways to make it possible for them to do what needs to be done in that area in which they don't have much experience.
Questions for Jennifer?
With Connect Transit, how far out can they go? Can they cover the whole, all of the territory, or are they anchored more towards just the metro?
Currently, they are restricted to an area smaller than our metropolitan planning area, for example. Goes a little bit past the incorporation boundaries of Burlington and Normal. Once this goes into effect, they will cover the whole county. And that will be new. We'll have to see how that goes because it's not been their bailiwick for all these years. So we're trying to sort of nudge them into a process that gives them the best possible coverage of the county. They also have to coordinate with the other surrounding counties in terms of getting people who have access to the rural services beyond their own counties. So we're talking with them about that. We're giving meetings sometime next week, I think, again, and trying to make sure that, we have everyone firing in all cylinders because we have no time left. This is shockingly late, and it's going to take some real definitive effort to make sure it happens.
Who's going to run dispatch for Connect? Are they going to run it internally?
I hope so, because that's part of what got me the game. I think the theory was that they have all the resources they need for this expansion of their service area, and it's just a matter of ramping it up in a couple of ways. We're figuring out how they can use their existing resources, and which are considerable, in order to add this to their expertise.
If you're going to report on Go Safe.
Yes, I am. That's why I'm still standing here. So as you all know, we have at long last managed to start our project from under the Safe Streets and Roads for All program from the federal government. So the first project, the kickoff meeting with our project steering committee was held on April 25th. And it was really interesting because it's a very diverse group. And this is a very technical subject, but they were really engaged. They had questions, they had suggestions, they had ideas. And I think the consultants were really shocked. They were expecting it to be quieter and for them to have time to pull room and stuff. The participants were all over it and thought of things that I hadn't thought of, which was a little embarrassing, but it went very well. So that's an excellent start. There's been, obviously, we executed the contract with a consulting firm, which is Block Mueller, and they've been doing some data retrieval. We've been doing some data retrieval to hand over to them. Lots of subjects under that. I've already talked about the kickoff meeting. And one of the things that came up in that, when we all looked at the timeline for this project must be completed by September 10th of this year. So it's a very fast timeline and a very quick, okay, let's do this thing, 24/7. So we'll see how that goes. I think the consultants are well equipped for this. The project meeting also generated considerable discussion that highlighted critical elements of the project, sort of description that the consultants gave. So as I said, a lot of back and forth and people coming up with issues from their perspective that maybe might not have come out if we had not brought them to this meeting. So again, members of the PSC will meet virtually with the project team on May 12th. So that's coming right up. And the topic of that meeting will be consideration of a Vision Zero commitment statement, which is not only a factor for the Vision Zero program, and we can talk about that someday, but also for the federal program that's based on. So that's a required element. We have to come up with a commitment in which basically all of the participating agencies, governments, whatever, say, yeah, we really want to do this, we're going to do this. You have our commitment. And that will be sort of the first stage in building the content of the updated plan.
Questions for Jennifer?
Just a thought I was having when you were talking about the Connect Transit and getting acclimated to McLean County. Unit 5 contracts with First Student for our busing services, so we certainly do have some expertise in a larger portion of the county than perhaps they have. I think it's 183 some square miles or something, and they say that McLean County's our Unit 5 is like the size of Tulsa, Oklahoma in terms of the city. So anyway, there might be some potential, collaborations or conversations that could occur with staff there to help ease that transition.
I will certainly pass that along. And I think the challenge here is that Connect has been operating in a very familiar template for a transit agency in the urban area with a handful of exceptions. They have started to branch out with the Flex program. And I've suggested to them, and others have as well, that that's kind of the model to use because it was an expansion of the area covered, and it did have, it was highly accessible, frequent if you needed it that way, but it followed different rules than the standard urban service. What they're venturing into is very much not standard for an urban provider because McLean County's 1,100 and some square miles and all the rest of it stuff. And it's a long way out to some of the areas of the county where there are communities that need the service. A lot of it from McLean County is people coming in to Bloomington Normal for resources, healthcare, all kinds of things. So
I would think a lot of the work that we do with our special ed routes and special routes would be very similar to this type of work, and that could be.
There are some rules from the Federal Transit Administration as to how this should be done, and they're a little arcane. And that's, obviously Connect is well used to working with both IDOT and the FTA, but this is a slightly different slant on how that should be done. And what again, I've suggested to them, and others have as well, that it's not so much like expanding their overall service, it's like expanding their mobility service. And every single vehicle on the rural routes has to be accessible. They have a whole series of procedures to make sure that anyone, whatever their condition, can safely ride the bus. So that's another sort of education aspect we're going to have.
If I may add to Connect Transit plans to publicize the services soon. So the school districts, not just Unified, but because there are other rural school districts out in McLean County, they will be, there will be some of those entities that will be suggesting to them to make sure the rural areas with the public libraries and school districts, maybe there's school bus companies and others, maybe there's some nonprofits, hospitals and whatnot, and medical centers, adult daycare maybe, and to really, we work together. We don't expect like on day one it's going to be like turnkey type, but I think the county really is the grantee in this case. They will Connect working with them. Also, they're trying to coordinate with Showbus too. I mean, they really try. So it will be has to be a collaborative effort to work together. Really, the benefactors, really the residents who need the service. So we'll do our part and to get everybody on board to really to make the transition as smooth as possible. But it's still going to take time, right? Maybe take a few months and whatnot to get everything perfect. But definitely they plan to do a lot marketing or publicity of the services.
One of the disadvantages of this whole transition has been that it took so long to work out the details of contracting. And because there was delay in getting approval from the various entities to confirm that Connect would be allowed to do it, ordinarily we would have more time. And, I sort of worked into it kind of period in which they'd have a chance to try things out. We don't have that this time. And so it is, it's hard on everybody. Showbus will also be doing a kind of outreach to their riders out in the rural areas and say, here's what's coming. That will also include some phone numbers. And then we will just see how it goes and hope for the best. And, put our hands up and say, are you sure about this? If things seem to be a little off kilter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ray, the Veterans Parkway Quarter Plan?
Yes. The next Project Steering Committee meeting is going to be this Friday in 2 days. They will be the consultant. You will be engaging the committee members in looking at segments of the roadway for different analysis and alternatives. And in the last month or so, although there wasn't a meeting of the Project Steering Committee in April, but the consultant has been kind of wrapping up on their field reports, on the public engagement report, on the needs and opportunity report, and also the existing conditions report. Now, noting that the public engagement is not done, there will be different opportunities during the remainder of the planning process. So it's ongoing. It's moving fast, not too fast, but then it's on schedule to what was envisioned for the entire planning process. So yeah, we're looking forward to this month's meeting in 2 days, but also just to heads up, in June there will be kind of a workshop, more interactive stuff with the members of the project steering committees. So we'll keep you posted.
Questions for Ray about veterans? Okay. Strategic land use plan, Ray and Anthony?
Yeah. I'll do the part one, and then Anthony is going to do the part two. We're doing this together. The strategic land use plan, it's kind of, if you will, it's kind of a outgrowth of the regional comprehensive plan update that you might have heard us saying a little bit before. The regional comprehensive plan update we've been doing a lot of behind the scenes data collection and analysis, and which we started last year. And during the process, we have learned from our local government partners from the city, town, and county, because the development pressure that they seem to have a more urgent need on the land use plan segment of the regional comprehensive plan. And so we have proposed that maybe like some other localities and some other counties or cities, some other regions, to have a region cover what we call strategic land use plan done first. That would cause all the demand pressure. I mean, you look at the agendas for the city councils, town councils, they have development proposals from the developers on housing development, commercial annexations, and other things. So the strategic land use plan is really trying to address the needs of land uses, which relates to zoning, what the future of the land uses should be, where and how much, that type of thing. And there's, in the comprehensive plans of the city, town, and county, they already have future land use plans, but there was some from some years ago. Now, especially in the last 5-6 years, a lot of developments proposals have taken place, and even some of them have been approved. So, and we anticipate there'll be more. And so, with the strategic land use plan is what we've been working on since last fall, and with a lot of information on trying to. Step number one is to look at the existing land use. What the existing land uses for the different parcels of not just the city and the town, but in the rural areas, or basically the entire county. And so we rely on data. We sort data from the assessors' offices, we've learned that they're not synced up with each other. So that's one of the really large challenges, the way that they assign codes for certain land use. So we had to really spend a lot of time, and we always got the whole team effort, but Thomas, Jen, and Anthony, worked really hard. I threw myself into it, and then later on when a few other staff members joined us, really it was time consuming, but I think we got a good handle. And also we've been working with the planning directors of city town and the county, trying to set some high level, what's the expectations. So we have had a draft existing land use, because we need more accurate data so that we can do what's next, what's in the future. And so if we know it's not going to be perfect, because existing, unless we walk every parcels in the county, we won't be able to get it accurately, but we try to rely on aerials, we rely on local knowledge by the different departments of city town county. We rely on the assessor's office and making sure there's some corrections, revisions that needs to be made, and trying to sync up. So we have created a draft existing land use map, and also there's some further studies and research on the implications, and try to decide on different categories of land uses to what levels to be. So from residential to commercial, industrial, transportation, parks and recreation, agriculture, really at different categories. And so we pretty much have the draft existing land use plan done, and there will be some slides that you see that will be shown. But just to give you a background, our goal is to have this strategic land use plan done around July of this year. And then while we're working concurrently on the update of the broader, the regional comprehensive plan update, which we envision to be finished by next summer into 2026. It's not unusual if you talk with your friends in other cities and towns. It usually a 2-year process at least. But we have started last year, so we envision once the land use plan is done, that it has to move things along. But we have started on looking at different work elements, what we call work elements, and then there will be like public engagement process and things like that for the regional comprehensive plan. But for the strategic land use plan, I'll have Anthony to explain. Okay. What's next? What's happening? And so that gives you some insight what we all should expect and what you should envision in the next few months. So, particularly.
Yeah. So, like Ray said, the regional strategic land use plan. There's a lot of acronyms, a lot of plans going around. So, comprehensive plan is the plan for the county. This is one section of that plan that has a little bit more detail in the urban area because of that time gap stuff here. So if you want to go to the next slide. Like you said, we got the raw data for the existing land use map from the McLean County Supervisor of Assessments, City of Bloomington Township Assessor, and Normal Township Assessor. That data, Thomas, you want to go to the next slide, was raw land use codes for every individual parcel, which is, from what we could get, some of the most accurate data for parcel-based data that we had access to. So we took all of those different codes and categorize them into different spatial land uses that we can reflect on the map. And then from that, we created the first draft. Thomas, you want to go to the next page of the existing land use map. So this has a handful of categories: agricultural, commercial, industrial, public institutional, natural, recreation and open space, residential, and transportation. So those were kind of the generalized land uses that we wanted to capture as the what's actually on the ground right now, so that we could kick off the I guess, quote unquote, more important map, the future land use, what we're anticipating the development to look like in the next 10 to 20 to 30 years. Thomas, you want to go to the next slide? This is a zoomed in aerial of the urban area of the existing map. And so we took these two maps, and Thomas, if you want to go to the next slide, and we created the future land use map. So this, as you can tell, there's some differences. This is the projected land use development in the next, however many years, 10 to 30 years. We got this information by, like I said, starting with the existing land use map and then reaching out to the city, town, and county to get their input to essentially assign future land uses to the areas that they saw or could potentially see the most development pressure. So one of the big things that jumps out right away is that purple area over by Rivian. Town of Normal assumed that there was going to be a lot of future development in that area. So pretty straightforward stuff like that. If you want to go to the next slide, Thomas. This is again a closer zoomed in perspective of the urban area. It's pretty busy, but there's a lot of stuff that we need to capture here. So the blue line is the ETJ, extraterritorial jurisdiction for the town and city. And then everything outside of that is county jurisdiction other than the local incorporated municipalities.
And is that the 2 mile radius or 1.5 mile radius?
Yeah, 1.5 miles. Yeah, yep. So that's extraterritorial jurisdiction as of right. So they have the opportunity to annex property within that area, and the county is required to notify them of any special use or subdivision developments within that area. So that's kind of essentially their planning area.
Right.
Do you know if all of that falls within the outside area? We know where 87 is in the middle there, but is that all unified, or you're catching into other school districts inside that blue circle?
I'm not too sure, but that's definitely a map that we can add to the actual draft plan document. It's kind of the school district and the overlay of that ETJ. All right. So Thomas, you want to go to the next slide? So at the same time we started the future land use map, we started drafting the actual plan document itself. This document sets the context for the plan, gives a brief history of McLean County, and sets an existing conditions report. The plan also includes definitions of the future land uses, definitions of the special planning areas, and acceptable uses for each one of those future land uses. The last part of this plan contains, again, an implementation plan so that there's not just, here's all this information, and how we're going to use it to help guide the local municipalities to make smart decisions. Next slide, please. So the next steps that we have are further refinement of the future land use map itself. We believe that the existing land use map is 99% locked in. There's still availability to edit if that comes up. Yesterday I presented to the McLean County ZBA for just an initial input from somebody that's not necessarily part of the municipal government directly. We got some good feedback from them, emphasis on agricultural preservation, a desire to see the actual changing statistics from here's what we have now existing, how much or more or less percentage of land uses is going to change. So that's what we mean by the more refinement of that future land use map. The draft plan document is missing a couple parts still. We wanted to get the main parts in so that we could send it out to the city, town, and county to get their initial feedback. So we're going to start filling in the gaps there. And then from that point, we're planning on going to the city and town planning commissions in June, first week of June, to get their initial comments as well. And at that point, we're hoping to have the entirety of the plan, first draft, completed. And then after that, we're hoping to put out a public comment period for the plan itself for around 3 or 4 weeks. So it gives us a little bit of time to update that plan and then eventually get it adopted by the local municipalities.
And this is the first step in terms of working on the McLean County comp.
Yeah, we have done some background research on the McLean County comp plan, but this is a major, more pressing component of the comp.
So the comp plan has a handful of different sections: education, transportation, infrastructure, land use is one of the main sections for every comprehensive plan. So the way we kind of went about this was that the city and the town having development pressures and they need an updated land use plan. We have to do a land use plan for the comprehensive plan anyway. So let's do this. It'll be a piece of the pie that we can work on and finish, and then eventually, with some modification, put it back into its position on the comprehensive plan.
Does in the comprehensive, you said there's an education section in the comprehensive plan, does that entail then based upon this land use expansion or propose where you want the new development to go, what school district buildings would be needed or space?
That's definitely something that we can look into for the comprehensive plan. So comprehensive plan is a little bit longer timeline, allows for a little bit more in-depth research like that, and it's definitely something that we can.
Yes, I mean, I look at that initial plan and you've got a lot out by the Carlock area, and that's just not.
And Carlock right now has some capacity, but not that kind of capacity.
Right.
So, that's definitely, and the junior highs on that end of town are totally, and Tawanda already has 2 portables. So, and Parkside has several portables. So, planning for those things.
Yes.
And I think if so say that development comes into fruition, I think it might help the school district to be able to say, we anticipated that this was a need, and we said that Unit 5 is going to start to need to look into more schools because in this area to meet capacity. I think that would certainly help us in terms of securing the funding that we would need to pursue.
Yeah. I think that's definitely something we can definitely do in the comprehensive plan. In the regional strategic land use plan, it's a little bit more high level. So it'll be, there's going to be a theoretical, 15% increase in residential land uses, which could potentially result in, a need for more school buildings.
Yeah, I think we plan to, on the education aspect, we plan to reach out to the school districts. Education is not just on the school district. We recognize the higher ed also is part of that too. But definitely, we don't want to create something or suggest something that contradicts what the school districts have in plans. It is more than just land uses. Also, we recognize there's some qualitative type, not just the expansion or movement or just buildings. So definitely, we'll have more conversations with the school district, regional office education, and others within that. And I'm sure 87 or 5, you have some plans too, right, for the future, and also with the recent approval of the additional funding sources and whatnot. Maybe your plan has need to be updated as well.
We'll have about 10 portables, I think we're at now for next year. When you have portables, the state requires you to submit a plan to get rid of them because it's a temporary thing, and so you have to file plans of how you're gonna get rid of the portables, and there's not space in other buildings in space where we need it. So those are certainly conversations that we have a lot.
Yeah.
Would there be some discussion of adding on to some of the schools?
I think all options would have to be on the table.
Yeah, it ties into the demographics and the age group distribution, the location. The education side, the school districts, it's not as we're not claiming to be the expert. They want to lay up front, because you have staff, that specialize in looking at those things.
And what we've done with new developments that have come on is we've declared them for school attendance being open access areas, and giving them a few schools of which they can choose to attend, because we don't have capacity for all in those new developments, all of those students to enroll at a particular school. So we have to kind of distribute it, and that could mean, a student from, down by Evans driving all the way up to Tawanda, which they do anyway for junior high, but just could be longer commutes for some of our younger kids. And then that applies to the busing needs, because we are required to transport them from that far. So.
Yeah, I was going to say someone from Evans might be going to a junior high elsewhere and they'd have to get bused.
Yeah, I mean, Tawanda students go to Evans Junior High.
Anything else? Any questions for Anthony or Ray?
Just one, Ray, Carl, too. I would say, just based on today's discussion and Ray, your comments about like completion by next summer, if everyone agrees, like I think this should be added to the regular agenda of like, you know, what are the other segments of the comprehensive regional plan and how are those moving forward towards that? I think Amy had a great example, like input of time and the different sections together. So just
Yeah, love to.
I thought. Great update today, thank you.
You know, we might consider the thought of I appreciate all these dates. Just put the date next to the agenda item. Completion by, or it'd be nice to have a time frame right there. Completion by such date.
To be reminded.
Yeah, it keeps us on task.
Yeah, we definitely can do that because some are restricted by grant agreements, some are our project resource, and working with others is a lot of times like working with the city and town staff, that different issues, scheduling things. We definitely would put what's the latest that we know of. If there's any changes, we definitely also would let you know too.
Is there anything else that needs to come before the committee today? If not, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. So, second?
Second.
You got it? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, same sign. We stand adjourned.
Carl, let me test your memory. Wilmington City Council, do you